Namaste and a warm welcome to Saranga Conversations. Now, fake news has become a multi-billion dollar industry. Fake narratives, that's a multi-million dollars. Now, if it's fake Indic narratives, the story is altogether different. If you look at YouTube channels that run content bashing India, their subscriptions run into millions. I don't have to name them. Everybody knows what those YouTube channels are. Now, one of the most loved fake narrative of this decade is the caste narrative. Suddenly, in conversations about India, we only hear terms like discrimination, Brahmin patriarchy, Dalit oppression, tribal rights violation, so on and so forth. Now, in addition to homegrown hatred, there is a large amount of content published by the Western media across the web portals and video platforms. Even Oprah Winfrey couldn't stay away from the topic. And she has been recently seen endorsing books written on the topic of caste. And I don't have to say much about the OTT platforms that run this kind of content. Is it really caste? Can we even call it caste? Now, I would say it is Varna Vyavastha. Now, what is Varna Vyavastha? And in order to get a clear understanding of the very term, its intent, its origin, and its purpose in the society that it was originally written into, we will have to look into our distant past and try deconstructing the very term caste as it is used today and see if that is what our Shastra writers meant, our sages, our ancestors. So we will also have to deconstruct and redefine related terms like oppression, discrimination, untouchability, Dalit, so on and so forth. And one of the core purposes of Saranga is to facilitate discourses and dialogues on flawed historical and religio-political narratives in order to set them right and reveal the truth behind them. Now, the narratives around caste hold a very important position in that list of topics. To that effect, we open our platform to speakers with diverse understanding of the Varna Vyavastha. Joining with me in this segment of our endeavor is Dr. Raj Vedam. Raj is not new to us and he doesn't need an introduction, but for those of you that are just joining the Indic conversations, he is an independent researcher of Indic history, and his area of contribution to the setting the narrative right is in decoding our past through genetical studies. To that effect, he has delivered hundreds of talks across social media video platforms and college and university campuses, both in India and the USA. So welcome to the Saranga Conversations, Raj.
Namaste, and thank you for having me. It's a real pleasure to be on Saranga.
Pleasure is ours. So let us begin at the beginning. Now, our Shastras are rife with allusions to division of the entire population of the Indian subcontinent into 4 castes, as it came to be called. Now, to an outsider, this division looked like one group was bestowed than the other, more privileges, more rights, better social status, and so on. Now, can you begin by telling why our ancestors suggested such divisions in our society in the first place? Now, aren't all humans born equal, as our Western philosophy promulgates?
Excellent. Thank you, Esther. That's an excellent beginning to our discussion. And first of all, I'd like to set the framework for our discussion itself. It's important to correct the terminology or deconstruct the terminology that we're using. And I think we need to start with the word division itself. I would prefer to call this a grouping of Indian society or an organization of Indian society, because the word division implies a negative connotation that there is a stratification happening and so on, which is not revealed in the historical tradition. So by framing the conversation in terms of division, We are already on a wrong path over here. So we have to see the question in the context of the grouping of Indian civilization or the organization of the Indian society, rather than looking at it as division. Okay, with that background, I think, Esther, it is important to look at the issue from three angles. One angle is a historical angle. The other angle is the practitioner or the experiencer of the society. The third angle is from the lens of the traditionalist. It's very important to get the dialogue going between all these voices, because if you look at the traditional view, it is a top-down view. The top-down view is one that is cohesive, that is aspirational, and that is the reference, if you will, for the society in terms of what our rishis saw. So it's very important to understand the top-down view. It's also important to get the bottom-up view, something that people today call subaltern and other such things, when the practitioner or the experiencer comes with their voices and say that this is how it was practiced. It is critical, however, not to stop with the voices of one generation, but look in the historical record across generations to see whether this is something that can be conflated to the distant past, or are these bottom-up narratives, can they only be relevant in a certain time period in society, and look at the social reasons or the political reasons or the economic reasons why things would have been so. Very, very critical to see that. The historical tradition examines the narratives, examines the evidence. It sees the evidence, it sees the facts, and tries to see what it is. So I am bringing the historical perspective. I'm trying to see what is the history of this grouping or organization, as opposed to the bottom-up narrative, as opposed to the top-down narrative. So when we go to the historical tradition, we must first talk about the sources. What are the sources? The first thing we can talk about is, for example, the Rig Veda. Rig Veda is one of the oldest oral traditions we have in the civilization. So we look at the Rig Veda to see, does it talk about a social organization and grouping? And if so, what is it? And we have seen that in Rig Veda, the Purusha Suktam, everybody knows about this. This has been demonized so much in today's narratives. And it's very important to also take a look at what is it? Well, it turns out to be a metaphor for the whole of society. It does not imply a division. Rather, it's talking about a cohesive organization of a society by calling out the Purusha, the various parts of the Purusha, in terms of the functioning in the society itself. By no means is it saying chop off the head because that is a division and that head will function on its own. Chop off the arm so that it is a division and this arm will function of its own. Chop off the legs because they're also a division and the legs will function on its own. This is a ridiculous conclusion we get if we take today's narratives that look at Purusha Suktam as a division of society, rather than looking at it as an organization. If we look at it as an organization, we clearly understand the intent of the early composers of the Rig Veda that saw society in this sort of an organization. Now, continuing on the sources, historical record, we can also appeal to the Bhagavad Gita. When the Bhagavad Gita is talking about the Varnas, it is clearly saying that it is the gunas or the disposition of a person that determines the Varna. It is not a stratified division as people would have you believe today. Rather, it is one's disposition and one's gunas that determine what one's Varna is. So very, very clear that in two historical traditions, we are seeing it's an organization. It is not a stratification. It is not a division. We are seeing these things. Let me take a third historical source, Adi Shankara. Adi Shankara, in the work Vajra Suchi Upanishad, he's addressing the question, who is a Brahmana? And he's asking, is a Brahmana supposed to be the superior person or what is it? And he analyzes that. Adi Shankara goes through a series of hypothetical situations and questions. He's asking, are you something special as a Brahmana because of the jiva that you have? And he's saying, no, that is not it, because the jiva goes from one body to the other. It cannot be that. Then he's saying, is it because of the deha or the body that you possess? Is that what makes you unique? He's saying, no, we all have similar bodies. Everybody's got similar functions. You don't have any additional function to make you superior or inferior, whatever. Then he's asking, is it the color that you have? Is it the colors making you into a Brahmana? He's saying, no, we are seeing colors in all the Varnas. There are some people in some Varnas who got the dark color, light color, everything's mixed across the Varnas. So it cannot be that. Then he's asking, is it the Jati? He's saying, no, we have seen that Valmiki, Vyasa are there who were from different jatis, but they rose to greatness on the basis of their wisdom and other callings. Then he's asking, is it the Jnana? Does the Brahmana possess Jnana? That's what makes him special. He's saying, no. Even the Kshatriyas have got great knowledge, and we have seen that in various historical traditions. Then he's asking, is it something to do with karma? And he's saying, no, everybody is partaking of karma. So Brahmana is not special because of karma. Then he's asking, is it because a Brahmana does dharmic actions? Then Adi Shankara himself is answering, saying, no, everybody is practicing dharmic actions. So it cannot be that also. Then Adi Shankara answers a rhetorical question, saying that only a realized Atman is a Brahmana. Somebody who's devoid of jealousy, somebody is devoid of greed, somebody is devoid of want, negativisms, and such things, and has got benevolence towards all. Such a person is a Brahmana. So again, we are seeing the historical tradition and the writings. If you take Rig Veda or Bhagavad Gita or recent times, Adi Shankara, everybody is talking about the same thing. Now, continuing on the historical tradition, let's go to Kapilavastu. Kapilavastu is where Gautama Buddha was. That's the city where he's from. And Gautama Buddha, after enlightenment, he comes back to the city of his birth, and his father is so happy. And he says, the entire city of Kapilavastu, let us go to the Vana, the forest where Buddha is there, and take his blessings. So, and in doing so, they are describing all the various professions of people, categorizations who are there, organization of that society, and they're calling them out, the goldsmith, the ironsmith, this person, that person, the warrior, that everybody, let us go and do that. So we are again seeing Kapilavastu, they're not talking to any divisions as such, but they're calling out the occupations. If you go to Megasthenes, Megasthenes is in Magadha again. He's in Magadha, and he also sees a historical tradition. And what he's seeing is that there are 7 divisions. He's calling out 7 divisions. He's not calling out Jati, Varna out here. He's calling out 7 divisions over there. Again, in the historical tradition, if we look, when we can look at Chinese records, Fahian, Huansang, again, the same things. If you go looking, are these people talking about caste system? Are they talking about divisions? You don't find anything anywhere. They're talking in general that this is a society that existed with a lot of amity, with a lot of prosperity, with a lot of kindness, and so on. And they're observing certain things. Fahian observed certain things, and we'll take it later in our discussion. We'll talk more about that. And if you go to the colonial times, for example, the Portuguese. Now, the Portuguese, they had a unique system. They wanted to keep what they call the bloodline purity. And this bloodline purity notion comes from the Abrahamic notion that the sons of Noah was this patriarch who survived the great flood in the Abrahamic tradition, and his sons Ham, Japheth, and Shem. And the descendants of Ham were so-called non-white people, the black people, brown people, and so on. And the descendants of Japheth were the white people, and Shem were the Semitic, the Jewish people. That is the biblical understanding. So it says that Noah cursed his son Ham that he's got to serve the other 2 brothers. So in order to preserve that bloodline purity, the whole lot of discrimination has happened in the Abrahamic society, and we have evidence of that all over the place. But in the Portuguese tradition, when they went to the Americas, when they were trying to conquer the Americas and other such things, the Spaniards, and they were observing that there were mixed marriages between the natives, between the Africans, and the continental Europeans and their descendants. And these mixed marriages, they wanted to see which category do they fall in. And they evolved the word casta to refer to this phenomenon in their society for their bigotry, so that they could call out these various races or bloodlines, if I should correct myself, bloodlines, and so on. So this word is what has been used later in India, as we'll observe just shortly. Now, additionally, the Dutch and the French, when they came to India, they too attempted to distort all over the place. We see from the time of, for example, de novo. De Nobili was a white man who decided to, missionary, who wanted to distort Hinduism by pretending there's a fifth Veda, and he's the author of the fifth Veda, which calls out Jesus Christ, and things of this nature. So they started distortions. The process of distortion started with missionaries, and the earliest, maybe not the earliest, but one of the ones was De Nobili, as we can see over there. As we go further down the historical tradition, we take a look at Caldwell. Caldwell was a missionary who served in southern India, in Tamil Nadu and other places. And he coined the word Brahminical Aryan in the context of suppression. He wanted to make a point that because there are two language families in India, the so-called Aryan and the so-called Dravidian, he wanted to show there's also racial categorization, and he wanted to show that the so-called Dravidians were oppressed by these Brahminical Aryans who came from the north in order to convert the southern Indian. One way to convert the southern Indian was to remove them from their roots, in this case, the Vedic roots, and then infuse them with anger and then turn them away from the Vedic roots. In doing so, Caldwell started distorting quite a few things. And then we see further in the historical record with people like Risley. Risley and others were anthropologists in British India who used things like cranial metrics, the width of the nose, height of the nose, to categorize what they called races of people. And they saw so many races in India because of such categorizations. And these are all failed metrics. These are all discredited and false, utterly false. But they use these things. So Risley and his predecessors also, they tried to bring in the notion of caste, this Portuguese casta. They tried to impose that on the Indian social order. And in doing so, so much of confusion was introduced. So when the British did their census, that they tried to institutionalize caste, Risley found more than 1,000 castes in India by the kind of orderings that he was trying to do. Additionally, they did not just create these castes in which they force fit all of India over there, whether you are a Muslim or a Hindu or a Christian, they were forced. People called it the Jati as a caste and that and this. So the Jati Varna system got completely distorted and stuffed into this entity that is called caste. Risley did not stop there. He also ordered these things on the notion of social preference. So the so-called caste that he created, thousands of them, were ordered by what he called social preference, which is basically a reflection of his biases and other things. And that is stuck on. That census has stratified us and is stuck on. That is what we're seeing. And since 1947, we are seeing that the Indian government also has reinforced the notion of caste through various mechanisms. I don't even have to go there, but we're seeing that rather than deconstruct this notion and go back to the ideal, we have seen a reinforcement of this by the Indian government and continues till today. However, Esther, what we can see is the Indian history is showing that the Jati Varna social organization has been enormously successful in helping the economy of the country. We will talk more about this later, but I'd just like to bring out the observations of three people. One is Angus Madison, other one is Will Durant, other one is Utsa Patnaik. All these people are saying that India was a tremendously rich society in the past. In fact, up to 33% of the world GDP in the turn of the Common Era, and slowly falling at the rate of about 10% over 1,000 years, until such time the British came to India. When the British started their colonization, we are seeing a rapid downfall in the fortunes of India. From approximately 24% of world GDP, we fell to under 4%. In 1947 when the British left. That is the amount of looting that the British have done. Why am I calling these things out? I'm calling these things out to ask the question, if India was rich, who had those riches? Who was that rich person in Indian societies that was so rich the British looted this so many trillions of dollars away, called Utsa Patnaik? Who were the rich people? Were the rich people the Brahmins? No, throughout history, the Brahmins have been beggars. They've been the poorest. They are possessors of knowledge and respected for their knowledge, but they have never had financial power. Neither did they have anything of value to offer so people would buy. It is the economic value for people to buy. So clearly, it was not the Brahmins. Was it the Kshatriyas? Well, the Kshatriyas were, you can say, they were landowners and such things. And so they did not have wealth directly except by the actions of others. The trading classes, the Vaishyas had huge guilds of trading guilds that were going across, participating in the Silk Route, participating in Indo-Roman trade, participating in from the times of Lothal, you can think that Vaishyas have been in huge trading guilds doing this kind of thing. And so, yes, the Vaishyas are wealthy. But what were they trading in? They were trading in goods. Who made these goods? These goods were made by artisans. What kind of goods are we talking about? If, for example, Esther, if today I ask somebody, let's say from Hyderabad, and say, what are your aspirations? The person might say, I want a bungalow in Banjara Hills, one of the most expensive places in Hyderabad. I want a separate bungalow over there. I want a couple of Audi cars and maybe a BMW or the best of the most expensive lot. I want to take European vacations. I want to wear Armani clothes and other such things. These are the aspirations. And if he spends the money goes off to these various actors. However, in medieval India and even in colonial India, if you ask somebody of the road, what are your aspirations? 200 years back, you go to Hyderabad and ask, what are your aspirations? The man is going to say, you know what? I would like to have a bullock cart, or maybe a horse cart, or maybe a couple of cows, or maybe I'd like to buy some jewelry for my wife, or maybe I'd like to buy some pots and pans so we can cook at home, or maybe something else, something very, very similar. Who made all these things? Who made the pots and pans? It is ironsmith. Who made the jewelry? The goldsmith. Who made the plow and other things? The carpenter. The carpenter, ironsmith, these are the people who did that. Who traded in cows? It was the farmer and other people who traded in these things. So clearly, we are saying that it is the artisan classes, the so-called lower classes, the so-called Shudra classes, were the ones in possession of every item of economic value that was needed by this huge population in medieval India. Approximately maybe 200 million, 100 million population that they were in ancient times. The goods that people wanted were made by this category of society. So they had the wealth. Everybody would buy from them. They had the wealth. Whether you had a barter system or giving gold coins or silver in exchange for these goods, they had the wealth. So clearly, we are seeing an organization of Indian society so that the lower classes were the most wealthy. The Vaishyas were trading in these goods, were also wealthy. The landowners, well, they had the land, some amount of wealth. The Brahmins were the poorest. So if you look at the works, like I said, of these economists, they're also showing that India was a cohesive, productive, wealthy society because of the organization, social organization we have had. And it is not at all messed up because of these divisions that we have. We don't see that evidence in the historical record. We have to go by the historical record. We don't see that. Another point, in history, we are seeing the fluidity of the Jati Varna system. And this is attested to by many examples from history. We all know, for example, Valmiki, Vyasa, who came from various communities, fisherman community or some other community and so on. And these people rose to the highest intellectual capabilities and created works that even today we are reading reverentially. So clearly we are seeing fluidity in the kind of access to knowledge and other things. One more example I want to give Esther, huge answer, but please bear with me. Aryabhatta. Aryabhatta, even today in some communist Marxist textbook, you'll find him spelled with two T's, B-H-A-T-T-A, Bhatta, as opposed to the correct spelling, B-H-A-T-A with a single thing, Bhatta. Now, you can read, for example, Clark. Clark was a professor of Sanskrit in the United States, 1930s, 35. He wrote a translation of Aryabhatta in English. You can download that from Google or archive and read that. In his preface, he's talking about the discussion that said, what is the correct English spelling of Aryabhatta? And is giving a huge amount of reasoning why he's saying should be one T and not two T's. If it is one T, if it is two T's, Bhatta implies a Brahmin. It implies somebody who's access to highest knowledge systems. And then the communists and Marxists would love to say, yes, Brahmins control knowledge and all this kind of things. However, he's saying clearly it is one T because of the way the information is present, which implies that he was not exactly a Brahmin, but he was in a serving community, if you will. His organization society was a server, a serving community. If he was a serving community, he had access to the highest wisdom of mathematics, astronomy, and the works that he's created. Even today, the Panchangas are made with Aryabhata's formulas. That shows a value we accorded to a person like that. So clearly, in the historical tradition, I only called out three figures, Valmiki, Vyasa, and Aryabhata. We are seeing there is fluidity of the Jati Varna system. There is no bigotry or discrimination anywhere here. People from any jati, any background in life were valued for their contributions, whether it is wealth, whether it is knowledge, they're valued for their systems. So we're seeing all of these things. And we are also seeing evidence of entire communities. Entire communities are moving across Varnas. We have seen that. Even during the Islamic times, we've seen that. Communities that are moving across Varnas, we're seeing that in the southern India, northern India, we're seeing these traditions. And I'd also like to give one more example from Nunes. Nunes was a Portuguese traveler who left an account of Vijayanagar Empire. So he's talking about how during Navaratri, the emperor, in this case, Krishna Devaraya, who open up the treasury and give gifts to all categories of society, in a society. And Nunes is saying on that day, outside the palace walls, huge crowds had gathered. And he's saying the most unruly were the Brahmins. Because the Brahmins are so poor, they were unruly, shoving them in the line, waiting, trying to break the line go. And he's saying the palace guards were roughing them up and making them stay in line. So if the Brahmins were the rulers and in power, you would not see them lined up as beggars outside the palace wall and beaten by whips by the palace guard to stay in line, waiting for a handout from the king. So even in the historical record, we are not seeing some of these things that they have. So Esther, what we have today called as a caste system is a gross distortion of Indian society's social organization. That is what we are seeing here. Our ancestors did not create divisions. They created social organization for the wealth and prosperity of the people. And we are seeing that throughout history. And we are not seeing what is called division, discrimination because of the social order. Finally, to address your question, you asked, aren't all humans born equal? This is a nice emotive thing to state today. However, it is not borne by empirical evidence. If you go to a hospital and see two babies born at the same instant of time to two different mothers in the hospital, one baby is 7 pounds, the other baby is maybe 8 pounds, right there you're seeing a difference. Maybe one baby is born with and gets jaundice, other baby does not get jaundice, so you're seeing a difference over there. Maybe one baby puts on weight quickly, other baby does not put on weight quickly within 2 or 3 weeks. There is a difference over there. So we are seeing empirically throughout our society, we are seeing division, not divisions, inequality. So the notion that all humans are born equal is a fine emotive statement to make, but when you look for the evidence, empirical or otherwise, it is meaningless. One should rather say, should there be some laws that apply equally to all? That is a better form of the statement than are all humans born equal, and that would not bear out from reality. So I hope this long answer addresses your question, Esther.
So fantastic insights there. Now you said the Brahmins were beggars, right?
I use that word beggars, but to imply that they were poor. They were not actually begging, but to imply they were poor. Yes.
Correct. So, but to the outsider, it looked like the Brahmins were given a special status in the society. So much so that killing a Brahman carried a far greater punishment than killing a member of any other Varna. Is the life of a Brahman more valuable than everybody else's? You were saying he was a beggar. So who was giving them this status? Who was it, and by what, on what basis were they being given this status? Now, isn't that discrimination on the basis of whatever, the social order, Varna, whatever you call it?
Excellent question. Thank you, Esther. Excellent question. So once again, we need to deconstruct the word. Here also using the word discrimination I think it is a shallow imposition of bigotry by malicious agencies. This is completely contrary to the historical facts. If one examines the historical facts, one will understand the context in which these kind of ideals came about. And using the word discrimination is malicious in this context. And we'll see that, whether it's by ignorance or pure maliciousness, we are seeing that such things have encoded today in our textbooks. And let me start by just giving the example of, let us say, Prime Minister Modi. Now, Prime Minister Modi, whenever he goes out, he's got Z category security, the black cats, commandos, so got the machine guns, maybe 10 of them are surrounding him all the time, looking here and there for threats and other such things. So wherever he goes, he's got security. However, I don't have any security when I go out on the road. I don't have any security. I don't even have a stray dog that is following me. Can I go and say discrimination? We are all under the same constitution. We are all human beings. We are all equal citizens. And how does Modi get security and I don't have security? So clearly, we are seeing a problem when we start interpreting things this way. Clearly, it is critical for the nation to have the head of the nation in a high state of security to make sure that nothing happens because of the importance this individual has for the nation's destiny, for the nation's security, for the nation's progress, for the nation's everything that you can talk of the front facing for the nation, the head of the nation is important. So
how do Brahmins compare with Modi?
So let me come over there. And by the way, Modi is also not exactly a Brahmin. Modi is from the backward community. It's very important to understand that context also. But I just gave Modi as an example over here to show how there are some individuals in society who are so important for that society that enormous resources are expended to ensure that that person is safe. That is, in today's world, we are seeing that. So it is important to note that in the past, kings often invited Brahmins for improving the economy. And for example, in southern India, you'll often find the Pandya kings, the Pallava kings, others would invite Brahmins to come and settle there. Same thing in western India, same thing in northern India, same thing in eastern India. You'd see that Brahmins are always invited, wherever they were, invited to come and settle in their kingdom. Why was this the case? Because what we are seeing is, when the Brahmanas would come, the kings would give them agraharams. Agraharams were villages which they could use for their activities or settle down over there by a riverside or whatever. And there'd be an organization of society around the agraharams. Typically, you'd have, once the Brahmanas are settled over here, in another portion of the town, you'd have the traders, another portion had the Kshatriyas, another portion had the artisans. So society was pretty soon organized around the Brahmins. And what we see is, typically, when the Brahmanas settle, there's a temple and there is a school. Every temple would also have a patashala associated with it. And who are the people who are taught in that patashala? That is also important. The people who are taught in the patashala were the artisans' children, the Kshatriyas' children, the Vaishyas' children, the Brahmanas' children. These people were taught in the patashala. Why was it important to teach all of these people, and who did they, and what did they teach them? They taught them skills like mathematics, grammar, from the scriptures, and many other things were taught to students, including the artisan knowledge. Why was that important for artisans? Because if you cannot make a quality good, if I'm a carpenter, I need to measure. I need to measure out just about everything, make sure joints fit together and do the proper thing. So if I cannot measure, I cannot create a proper good. And if I was a Vaishya, let's say in trading the Silk Route, if I don't know the exchange rate between the currency in my country and the currency a Chinese comes with or somebody else comes with, then I cannot trade properly. I might be cheated. So if you must know mathematics to conduct commerce, otherwise you might be cheated. So every class of society needed knowledge. That's why India's economy was that high in the past. It was a literate, educated society. And the kings knew this. So the organization of society that I talked about, the process starts with inviting Brahmanas to settle in your kingdom. Once the Brahmanas settle, society organizes around the Brahmanas, and that contributes to the economic well-being of the nation. And repeatedly, we are seeing that economic growth and prosperity was driven by the settling of Brahmanas in one's kingdom. attested to, like I said, by Angus Madison, Utsa Patnaik, and Will Durant, and all of these people have said these things. Now, given that each member was valuable to society, great deterrence was also prescribed for crimes against valued people. For example, even today, if we kill some high value targets, such a crime is treated differently than killing some other target. For example, in USA, in Chicago, downtown Chicago, there's always some gunning taking place, and drug dealers have been gunned by other drug dealers and other such things. Crimes are happening. At the same time, if somebody goes and shoots down a policeman, that policeman shooting will be played on CNN in 24 hours, whereas the killing of a drug dealer on the road by other drug dealers, nobody cares for that. So the question to ask is again, society treating each other differentially, unequally, or is there a value placed in different members? Police has got a high value in society, and so he's treated in a certain way. Similarly, we are seeing that because of the deterrence value of the person to society, great deterrence was attached. A Brahmana was important to society because of the knowledge carried by this person. There are very few of them, very few Brahmanas around. Given the value, given the economic value to the nation, he was accorded the highest security, if you will, such that deterrence, if you will, that if you commit a crime against a Brahmana, this is the punishment that you would have. Similarly, if you committed a crime against somebody else, this is the punishment that you would face, and so on. So I would see this as a value accorded by society to the different actors in that society. There is no discrimination here at all. To position this as discrimination is to say that Modi's got security, I don't have, Modi is discriminating against me. It is as ridiculous as that. It's utterly ridiculous to position as that. So there is no evidence at all also that any of these prescriptions that we find in Manusmriti or elsewhere were ever carried out. They were just written down in Smritis, but there's no evidence it was carried out. For example, like I told you, Krishnadevaraya's court, you're finding that the Brahmins are lined up outside the castle wall, waiting for handouts on Vijayadashmi day, and the palace guards are beating them with whips to stay in line and not be unruly over there. Where is the question of Brahmins being accorded the highest? So we are seeing that these are prescriptions never carried out. The reality is far different. Brahmins did not have the money power. They did not have the political power, muscle power. Nothing was there. They only had the intellectual tradition, and they're valued for their intellectual tradition, respected for their intellectual tradition. And because there are so few of them, it was important to ensure that their well-being is there. That is why society prescribed high deterrence to any crimes against Brahmanas. And in a scale, they went down to different places. Very enlightened, if you ask me, rather than the shallow attribution of discrimination that is done in today's narratives, which is utterly contrary to the historical evidence.